Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Rohan Khandelwal. I'm a breast cancer surgeon and a surgery faculty associated with Marrow. In this session, I'll be covering up the questions asked in surgery in the June 2021 exam, and I will also be covering up other important points which will be helpful for you in your future FMG exams. Now, before I start the session, this session had almost 35 questions from surgery, which is usually the norm. They were usually one-liners or two-liners, and a lot of them were repeat from the last few year papers. So it's very important for you, those who are preparing for the FMG exam, that you go through the last 2-3 year papers, as it would be helpful for you because a lot of repeat questions are being asked. The new questions which have been asked, I will cover them in this session, so you can make a note of them as well. Now, without wasting any further time, let's start with the questions. GCS is almost a certain question asked every year in the exam. So this was a question regarding Glasgow Coma score. They had asked that a patient comes to the emergency room after sustaining a head injury. He is able to open his eyes to painful stimulus. So eye opening to painful stimulus will be E2. He is uttering inappropriate words. V3 is inappropriate words. And he withdraws to painful stimulus. So we know that 6 is normal movement, 5 is when the patient localizes pain, 4 is when the patient withdraws away from pain. So this is E2, V3, M4, that is the correct answer. And this is the Glasgow Coma score, which you should know about. This has been asked umpteen number of times, so all of you should memorize the Glasgow Coma score. It has 3 components: eye opening, verbal response, and motor response. One more question which I want to tell you: individually speaking, motor response is the most sensitive. Motor response is the most sensitive and has a prognostic implication all by itself as well. The second question is of a patient following a road traffic accident. The patient is brought to the emergency room with tachycardia and hypotension and has a respiratory rate of more than 22 per minute, right? So there's tachycardia, hypotension, and tachypnea. The GCS is 7. What should be the next step in the management? So you know that whenever we are dealing with a trauma patient, we always follow the principles of ATLS. Okay, please remember this. We follow the principles of ATLS. ATLS is Advanced Trauma Life Support. In Advanced Trauma Life Support, you have primary survey and you have secondary survey. The primary survey is ABCD. ABCD is extremely important. A is for airway, B is for breathing, C is for circulation, C is for circulation, D is for disability. So this is the order which we follow. So airway is given first priority along with cervical spine. The secondary survey is a detailed survey in which I'll search for all other injuries. Now, I've told you in airway it is always cervical spine followed by airway. You should know what are the features where we know that the airway is compromised. That means if the airway is compromised, you will need to intubate the patient. So, patient unable to speak, GCS 8 or less than 8, a comatose patient, and severe maxillofacial injury. So these are the features of airway compromise. Now if we look at the question, the GCS is less than 8. So in this patient, airway is compromised. So A is compromised. So the first thing which will be done is intubation. Very important question. This can be asked in future. We have to apply the principles of ATLS. There were 2 questions which were asked regarding the principles of ATLS. This was the second one. A patient presents to the emergency room after a road traffic accident in which he sustains a blunt trauma to abdomen. Right? So blunt trauma to the abdomen. What should be the initial step? I've told you it is A, B, C, D. Now there is nothing mentioned about airway here. So we are not going to discuss about airway. Neither is breathing mentioned. But the patient comes to the emergency after road traffic accident and blunt trauma abdomen, the patient can be hypotensive. So we have to take care of circulation first, right? C has to be taken care of. Now there are two options for circulation: start resuscitation with crystalloids or start resuscitation with blood products. So initially we start resuscitation with crystalloids, and that is the correct answer here. One more change which you need to know, this is in the latest ATLS guidelines, that 1 liter of crystalloid should be given. More judicious fluid approach, 1 liter of crystalloid should be given initially in patients with trauma. Another constant question is regarding head injury, and there was a question that a patient is brought to the emergency room with a Glasgow Coma score of 12. NCCT, you know that investigation of choice for head injury is non-contrast CT scan. Another very important question, head injury investigation of choice is non-contrast CT scan. So this NCCT has been done. What is the diagnosis? You can see here that there is a biconvex hemorrhage here. There is a biconvex or a lens-shaped hemorrhage. And you know, biconvex or lens-shaped hemorrhage is seen in EDH, extradural hematoma. This has been asked multiple times in the exam. EDH usually occurs in young patients following a high velocity impact. Bleeding is arterial in nature. And another question asked is that the middle meningeal artery is implicated. Right, the middle meningeal artery is implicated. You get a biconvex or a lens-shaped hemorrhage, and patients can come with a lucid interval. Lucid interval, you know, is the time period of normal consciousness between 2 episodes of unconsciousness. So period of normal consciousness between 2 episodes of unconsciousness is the lucid interval. Another type of bleed is SDH, subdural hematoma. Subdural hematoma is usually seen in elderly patients, and it is following a trivial trauma. Venous bleed because of bridging veins, and here you will get a concavo-convex hemorrhage. EDH, it was biconvex, here it is concavo-convex. There was another question regarding head injury, that a patient with head injury comes to the ER. Patient has a raised intracranial pressure and low BP. Now normally patients with head injury have Cushing reflex, right? Cushing reflex occurs due to raised ICT, raised intracranial tension. There is bradycardia, and there is hypertension. But here there is hypotension. So they are asking which drug will be used to reduce the intracranial tension, and you know the drug which is used is mannitol. Mannitol is used, that is the correct answer. Steroids are usually avoided in traumatic head injury. We don't use steroids in traumatic head injury. Central venous pressure, CVP, is increased in which type of shock? So 1 or 2 questions from shock are standard in all exams. So you know that there are various types of shocks. You have hypovolemic shock. In hypovolemic shock, there is tachycardia, there is hypotension, and the JVP is going to fall. JVP, CVP, jugular venous pressure or central venous pressure means the same thing. So this is going to fall in hypovolemic shock because there is loss of blood volume. In cardiogenic shock, for example, you have cardiac tamponade or you have myocardial infarction. In these, the heart is not working. So if the heart is not working, the preload is getting accumulated and the preload increases, so the JVP can increase in cardiogenic shock. That is the correct answer. In cardiogenic shock, JVP increases. In all the other shocks, JVP is going to decrease. Neurogenic shock has been asked multiple times in the exam. You should know that there is bradycardia plus hypotension. So don't confuse this with Cushing reflex. Cushing reflex in head injury, I just told you, was bradycardia and hypertension. Neurogenic shock gives rise to bradycardia and hypotension. Two very important questions which have been asked multiple times. The best indicator to determine the amount of fluid required in shock is pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. Pulmonary capillary wedge pressure more than central venous pressure. This question was there in last year's FMG exam. And the best indicator of fluid resuscitation in shock is urine output. Another constant question, this is been asked multiple times, that a 22-year-old male comes to the emergency room following road traffic accident with breathlessness and tachycardia. So there is breathlessness and there is tachycardia. X-ray is shown below. What is the diagnosis? So in this X-ray you can see that this area is completely blacked out, right? So there is pneumothorax. You can't see the lung markings. There is pneumothorax, and because the vitals are unstable, there is tachycardia, there is breathlessness. This is tension pneumothorax. You can see that there has been a mediastinal shift. Patient has altered vitals, and you can see pneumothorax on one side. This is tension pneumothorax, and in tension pneumothorax we have to put a wide bore needle to decompress. Now the new guidelines are in the 5th intercostal space in the mid axillary line. So this is tension pneumothorax, and I just told you E-fast can be used to diagnose this, and needle decompression has to be done, and it is placed in the 5th intercostal space slightly anterior to the mid axillary line. This is an important change. Earlier it was 2nd intercostal space, mid clavicular line. Now it is the 5th intercostal space, mid axillary line. So you should know this for your exam. This one is cardiac tamponade. This is cardiac tamponade, and in cardiac tamponade we get Beck's triad. Beck's triad has also been asked multiple times in the exam. Beck's triad is hypotension. There is muffled heart sounds. Muffled heart sounds are there. And there is raised JVP or distended neck veins. That is cardiac tamponade. This is a patient where fluid can be seen. So this is probably a hydropneumothorax or a hemothorax. Another question, a chronic smoker is undergoing major surgery under general anesthesia. Suddenly the patient's vitals become unstable and breath sounds are not heard on the left side. So you know these smokers, chronic smokers can have bullae, and these bullae can rupture because of pressure, and this can give rise to pneumothorax. So when there is pneumothorax, there will not be breath sounds on that side. Okay, so the correct answer here is tension pneumothorax, which can occur due to a ruptured bulla in COPD patients or chronic smokers. Another very basic general question was asked, that supposing a patient requires emergency surgery. So supposing you have a trauma patient who's come to the emergency and nobody has come with him, the ambulance has got him, and he requires emergency surgery. So this emergency surgery is life-saving for this patient, and you can carry out a life-saving procedure without waiting for anyone else's consent. So no need to wait for consent. You can operate if it is a life-saving procedure. Another very common question, this was asked last year as well. Last year the image had been asked. A patient had burns 10 years back and now presents with ulceration over the burnt area. What is the diagnosis? So you know that in a burns, long-standing burns or venous ulcer, if a cancer develops or if a ulcer develops after many years, it is known as a Marjolin's ulcer, and this Marjolin's ulcer is usually a squamous cell carcinoma. So you can see here, this is a burn area of burns, and this new ulcer has formed here. This is a squamous cell carcinoma or a Marjolin's ulcer. It has been asked many times in the exam. A chronic smoker, so they've given a hint, this is a smoker who's come with an oral lesion and you've been asked to identify the oral lesion. Now you can see here in the image, this oral lesion is whitish, and you know whitish lesions in the oral cavity, they are known as leukoplakia, and leukoplakia is a pre-malignant condition in the oral cavity. Leukoplakia is a pre-malignant condition in the oral cavity. Now this leukoplakia, I've already told you, you can differentiate it from candidiasis. This top one is candidiasis, where you can see this candidiasis can be rubbed off and it will leave a reddish margin. It will leave a reddish margin, that is candidiasis. Okay. This is erythroplakia. Erythro, the name itself is telling you erythro means red. This is a red patch and this also increases the risk of cancer. Erythroplakia is more pre-malignant than leukoplakia. Please mind you, remember this, erythroplakia is more pre-malignant than leukoplakia. Another pre-malignant condition is oral submucous fibrosis. This is also a pre-malignant condition in the oral cavity, and this occurs because of hypersensitivity reaction to areca nut, right? To betel nut or areca nut, hypersensitivity reaction that can give rise to fibrosis, and this can also increase the risk of cancer in patients. What is the most common site of oral cancer overall? So most common site of oral cancer overall is the lateral border of tongue. This is all over the world. Lateral border of tongue is the most common site. Most common in India is the buccal mucosa or the gingivo-buccal sulcus. So these two questions have also been asked in the exam. Fortunately, they did not ask these details. They had asked a very basic question. So the correct answer here is going to be oral cavity. So this is a squamous cell carcinoma, lateral border of tongue, which is the most common site for oral cancer all over the world. Now, there's usually one question from staging which is asked. So this question was regarding a 55-year-old postmenopausal lady who had come with a breast lump measuring 6 into 4 centimeters. So more than 5 centimeters is T3. There is a single palpable mobile lymph node. So this is N1. No distant metastasis, so M0. So T3, N1, M0, this classifies as LABC. What is LABC? LABC is locally advanced breast cancer. LABC is locally advanced breast cancer. So locally advanced breast cancer is T3, N1, M0, any T4, any N2, any N3 with M0. This classifies as locally advanced breast cancer, and for locally advanced breast cancers, we will give NACT. What is NACT? Neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Neoadjuvant meaning before surgery. So in locally advanced breast cancers, we give chemotherapy first, we shrink the tumor, and then we carry out surgery. So the correct answer is going to be neoadjuvant chemo followed by modified radical mastectomy. Radical mastectomy is not done these days. You won't give radiotherapy first, and you can't do BCS straight away in a locally advanced breast cancer. Another question regarding staging was a 42-year-old lady comes with a breast lump measuring 4 into 4 centimeters, and the image is shown below. Based on the image shown, what is the T stage? So you can see this appearance is known as the orange peel appearance. This is known as orange peel appearance or peau d'orange, and this peau d'orange is skin involvement. This is a sign of skin involvement in breast cancer, right? So skin involvement will be T4B, will be skin involvement. T4A is the involvement of chest wall, and mind you, pectoralis major is not considered as involvement of chest wall. Okay, so this is T4B or orange peel appearance. T4C is A plus B. So this was the T stage which you should know about. You also have T4D, which is inflammatory breast cancer. Inflammatory cancer is T4D. This has the worst prognosis. Another question with correlation with pathology was that a patient with breast cancer undergoes a repeat biopsy and signet ring cells are seen in biopsy. Which lesion is the patient suffering from? So in breast cancer, signet ring cells are seen in lobular cancer, right? What are the other cancers where we can see signet ring cells? Signet ring cells can be seen in gastric cancer, in diffuse gastric cancer. They can even be seen in colonic cancer. They can even be seen in colonic cancer. So these are signet ring cells. And lobular carcinoma, infiltrating lobular carcinoma, another classical question is the Indian file pattern. This has also been asked in the FMG exam. You will get the Indian file pattern. That means the cells are arranged one after the other in a single line. Another very easy question was that a postpartum lactating lady, the one whose breastfeeding comes with redness and pain in the breast. Image is shown below. Anyone can diagnose this. This is a straightforward image of a breast abscess. Breast abscess, you know, the most common organism is Staphylococcus aureus. This is seen in lactating women. Patient comes with pain, swelling, fever. Diagnosis is by ultrasound, and the antibiotic of choice is amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid. Amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid, or Augmentin as the common name, that is the antibiotic of choice. Next question is that a patient comes with diffuse goiter, means there is diffuse enlargement of the thyroid, and patient has raised T3 and T4. So if the patient has raised T3, T4, that means the patient has hyperthyroidism. Now let's look at the options. Physiological hyperthyroidism, there's nothing of that sort. Hashimoto's rarely for a brief period produces hyperthyroidism. So we have two conditions, Graves' disease and Plummer's disease. Now Graves' disease is going to produce a diffuse goiter, whereas a toxic multinodular goiter is known as Plummer's disease. So if there are multiple nodules and there is hyperthyroidism, that is Plummer's disease. But if it's a diffuse goiter and there is hyperthyroidism, that is Graves' disease. So Graves' disease is the correct answer. And you know, in Graves' disease, you can even see eye signs like exophthalmos can also be seen in these patients. Another easy question, straightforward question was, which isotope is used for thyroid cancer treatment? And the correct answer is iodine 131. Iodine 121 and technetium 99 are used for scanning, but iodine 131 is used for treatment. This acts via beta rays and it has a half-life of 7 to 8 days. It has a half-life of 7 to 8 days. This has been asked multiple times in the exam. There's at least one question from thyroid cancers each year, and one of the favorites is this image which is shown. There was a patient with a thyroid lesion. Patient undergoes thyroidectomy. Pathologist receives the specimen, and the image is shown below. These cells are seen in which cancer? So you can see here these cells have a clear cytoplasm and a prominent, you can see this clear cytoplasm, right? And these cells are known as orphan aniide cells, orphan aniide nuclei, right? So orphan anii was a cartoon character in which the cartoonist forgot to make the pupil, so You have clear eyes, or those cells are known as orphan annihide nuclei. You can even get samoma bodies, and these are seen in papillary carcinoma thyroid. In medullary thyroid cancer, you will see amyloid-rich stroma. In medullary thyroid cancer, you will see amyloid-rich stroma, which is pinkish material. That slide has also been asked in the exam. A patient with a thyroid disorder comes with high TSH. High TSH means, TSH goes opposite direction. So there is hypothyroidism and there is anti-TPO antibodies, right? So hypothyroidism and anti-TPO antibodies are seen in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in the Western world. In India, still it is iodine deficiency, and that is what Harrison also writes. So Hashimoto's or lymphocytic thyroiditis is the most common thyroiditis, and it can have autoantibody levels. There can be autoantibodies against thyroglobin, thyroid receptor, and thyroid peroxidase. There can be a diffuse goiter, and the patient will have hypothyroidism. Killian's dehiscence, so this was slightly towards the surgical anatomy part. Killian's dehiscence is a potential space between cricopharyngeus and thyropharyngeus. Both are portions of inferior constrictor muscle. And these are the two portions which have a potential space. That potential space is known as Killian's dehiscence, and the question which has been asked many times, Zenker's diverticulum, which is a false diverticulum, comes out through this Killian's dehiscence. This is what Zenker's looks like on a barium swallow. That is the investigation of choice, and these patients can come with regurgitation, and the complication can be aspiration pneumonitis as well. Zenker's diverticulum is a very important question which has been asked multiple times in the exam. A 30-year-old lady presented with a swelling in the inguinal region, and this swelling reduces with a gurgling sound. So swelling reducing means that there is definitely a hernia, and gurgling sound means that there is bowel inside. Okay, so bowel is reducing with a gurgling sound. It disappears completely through the deep ring. So this is the clue. So the Hasselbalch's triangle. Hasselbalch's triangle, is bounded by the inferior epigastric vessels, the outer border of rectus, and the inguinal ligament. And any hernia which comes lateral to triangle is indirect. And this is the deep ring. So lateral to it is the deep ring. So any hernia which is coming through the deep ring will be an indirect inguinal hernia. Whereas a hernia coming through the posterior wall is going to be a direct hernia. So the correct answer here is going to be indirect inguinal hernia. That will be the correct answer here. Indirect inguinal hernia you should also know is the most common hernia overall. Patient is having gastric outlet obstruction with persistent vomiting. What is the acid-base imbalance? Asked very frequently, gastric outlet obstruction. One of the causes is also hypertrophic pyloric stenosis in children, and this is going to give rise to hypocalemic, hypochloremic, metabolic alkalosis with paradoxical aciduria. So metabolic alkalosis is the correct answer here. There's hypokalemic, hypochloremic, metabolic alkalosis. After binge drinking, a young alcoholic male presents with hematemesis. Hematemesis, means blood in the vomitus. And blood in the vomitus after alcohol drinking, the correct answer is Mallory-Weiss tear. Mallory-Weiss tear is a split. It is a longitudinal split which starts at the GE junction and goes to the cardia, and it can give rise to blood in the vomitus. Okay, 90% Mallory-Weiss tears are self-limiting. That means the bleeding will stop after some time on its own. The bleeding stops on its own. Boerhaave syndrome can also be seen in alcoholic patients, but this is spontaneous perforation of the esophagus. This is spontaneous perforation of the esophagus. This is not hematemesis. There will be perforation. The patient will come with mediastinitis and sepsis, and that can lead to mortality. So two are very different. Boerhaave's is perforation. Mallory-Weiss is just a split. So don't get confused between the two. A 35-year-old patient comes with low-grade fever, anorexia, and weight loss since 1 year. During investigation, a barium meal follow-through is done. What is seen here? So you can see that there is a pulled up cecum here, right? There is a pulled up cecum and there is a stricture here. This is a stricture in the terminal ileum. So stricture and pulled up cecum are characteristic features of ileocecal tuberculosis. Now this was a new question, slightly tricky as well. They had asked which of the following pairs of cancer staging have been correctly matched. So oral cancer, Jackson staging. No, Jackson staging is one more staging for penile cancer. Bladder cancer, we follow the TNM stage. Testicular cancer is not Breslow. Breslow is for malignant melanoma. The correct one is gastric cancer. You have the Borman's staging, and Borman's classification is for advanced gastric cancer, whereas the Japanese classification is there for early gastric cancer. So you should know this. Borman's is for advanced gastric cancer, and for early gastric cancer you have the Japanese classification. What is the diagnosis? Based on the barium swallow image. So you can see this barium swallow image is a characteristic image of corkscrew esophagus. Corkscrew esophagus is seen in diffuse esophageal spasm. So corkscrew esophagus is seen in diffuse esophageal spasm. These patients are going to come with chest pain, which is going to mimic myocardial infarction, right? Chest pain which mimics myocardial infarction. Achalasia cardia, this was another question which was asked, two questions regarding barium swallows. Achalasia cardia, you get the bird's beak appearance. This is the bird's beak appearance which is seen in achalasia. This is bird's beak appearance. There is gradual tapering, whereas cancer, you are going to see rat tail appearance, and you will see ragged edges, irregular edges. Rat tail appearance is seen in cancer. Bird's beak appearance is seen in achalasia. Zenker's, I had already shown you the barium. Corkscrew esophagus is seen in diffuse esophageal spasm. So you should know these barium images. They are asked frequently in the exam. A patient presents to the emergency room with acute abdominal pain since 1 day. On examination, there is guarding present and X-ray shown below. What do you see in the X-ray? You can see in the X-ray gas under diaphragm. This is again a very commonly asked X-ray. All of you should be able to identify gas under diaphragm, and you should know that gas under diaphragm is a feature of hollow viscous perforation. So if the bowel perforates, gas will come out and it will come below the diaphragm. That is hollow viscous perforation. You get gas under diaphragm on X-ray. An elderly woman with non-passage of flatus and feces. So non-passage of feces, you know, we are already hinting towards obstruction. With bilious vomiting. Vomiting is also one of the cardinal features of obstruction. X-ray shown below. What is the diagnosis? So it is not a mass, it is not perforation. You have to differentiate between large bowel and small bowel obstruction. You can see here that you can see the typical step ladder pattern here. You can see the typical step ladder pattern. Step ladder pattern is classical of small bowel obstruction, that to jejunal obstruction, right? You will get complete volvulae step ladder pattern. This is small bowel obstruction. In bowel obstruction on an erect X-ray, this X-ray has also been asked, you are going to see air fluid levels. You can see more than 3 air fluid levels is suggestive of obstruction. Jejunum has a feathery appearance. It is going to give rise to a step ladder pattern, right? And you'll get this feathery appearance, which is what was shown in the image. Large bowel obstruction, large bowel is peripherally placed. Small bowel is centrally placed, okay? And large bowel, you will get incomplete hostrations. You can see these hostrations are incomplete. They are not going to the other wall. Whereas in jejunum, they were going from one wall to the other. These are complete volvulae. A 45-year-old male comes with complaints of pain abdomen, vomiting and diarrhea. Pain abdomen, vomiting and diarrhea. Serotonin values are raised, right? Serotonin levels are raised. What is the most probable diagnosis? The answer is carcinoid tumor. Carcinoid tumor is a neuroendocrine tumor. It is a neuroendocrine tumor. You can get sweating, diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and there can be increased serotonin. And this increased serotonin is going to give rise to increased 5-HIAA in urine. 5-hydroxyindole acetic acid. 5-hydroxyindole acetic acid in urine. What very simple question, what is the maximum point of pain in acute appendicitis? You know the answer is McBurney's point. McBurney's point has been asked many times in the exam. McBurney's point is situated at the junction of lateral 1/3 and medial 2/3 on the line joining the anterior superior iliac spine to the umbilicus. So anterior superior iliac spine to umbilicus, the line joining that, lateral 1/3 and medial 2/3 junction is the McBurney's point, and that is where you have maximum pain. Other signs in acute appendicitis can be pointing sign, psoas sign, and obturator sign can be seen as well. Another sign is Robsing's sign. A female presents with right hypochondrial pain. So they've already given a hint here, right hypochondrial pain radiating to the back along with vomiting. On examination, there is guarding in the right hypochondrium, and this patient has had similar episodes in the last 1 year. So you know the right side, right hypochondrium, you have the gallbladder. If the gallbladder is inflamed, then pain can even radiate to the back. So remember that pain always going to the back is not pancreatitis. I know you people can get confused with pancreatitis, but pancreatitis pain will be in the epigastrium going to the back. This is right hypochondrium going to the back, so this is acute cholecystitis. The investigation of choice for cholecystitis is ultrasound, and if there is a gallstone, you can see a post-acoustic shadow if a gallstone is present. This was asked in last time's FMG exam. Post-acoustic shadowing is seen in a gallstone on ultrasound. Identify the condition shown in the barium image. This is a classical sign of colonic diverticulosis. You get the sawtooth appearance. This is classical sign sawtooth appearance, which is seen in diverticulosis. Ileocecal TB, I've already told you the features of stricture and a pulled up cecum. A 25-year-old female with pain in the right iliac fossa presents with vomiting, and it is managed conservatively. She is stable when the pain worsens after a few days and her fever is increased as well. She required extraperitoneal drainage under ultrasound guidance. What is the diagnosis? So you have a patient with acute appendicitis whom you've managed conservatively. She had a lump there, managed conservatively, but now she started running fever, pain has increased, so an appendicular abscess has formed. And this is again a very important point which you should know. You should know about the Ochsner-Sherrin regime. This has also been asked in the exam. Ochsner-Sherrin regime is the management of an appendicular lump. And if the patient recovers, we do interval appendicectomy after 6 weeks. But as in this case, if the patient deteriorates, that means an abscess forms, then we have to drain the abscess under ultrasound guidance. A 70-year-old patient comes with bleeding per rectum on DRE. DRE is digital rectal examination. He has a rectal mass suspicious for cancer. What will you advise him next? So this is a very important point. We have to do a biopsy to confirm the diagnosis, but you should always remember that colorectal cancers, 4 to 5%, you can have synchronous cancers. You can have synchronous cancers, that means you can have multiple cancers in the colorectal region. So any patient with a colonic cancer or a rectal cancer, you should do a full colonoscopy to rule out other cancers and a biopsy. That will be the next step. So sigmoidoscopy is wrong. You have to do a full colonoscopy to get to the diagnosis. Identify the operation shown in the image. This has also been asked many times. You can see here that you have the cut end of the pancreas. The pancreas cut end, you have the cut end of the stomach, and there is anastomosis with the CBD. So 3 anastomosis: pancreatico-jejunostomy, gastro-jejunostomy, and you have hepatico-jejunostomy. This is Whipple's operation for pancreatic cancer. For pancreatic head cancer, this is Whipple's procedure. You should know this. Fraze procedure is done for chronic pancreatitis. Fraze is done for chronic pancreatitis. Ramsted's pyloromyotomy is done for congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. Congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. And Heller's myotomy is done in patients with achalasia cardia. Heller's myotomy is done in patients with achalasia cardia. Another question related to pancreas. There is a 25-year-old alcoholic male. He comes with pain in the epigastrium radiating to the back. So I told you epigastric pain going to the back, more suggestive of pancreatic pain. On examination, there is a lump in the epigastrium. CT is done. What is the diagnosis? So you can see here, this is a pseudocyst. You can see a pseudocyst, and pseudocyst is commonly seen in the lesser sac. Pancreatic pseudocyst is the correct answer here. This is also a repeat question which has been asked previously. A 65-year-old male with multiple episodes of painless hematuria. So we are moving to the urology questions now. There is painless hematuria. There is a ballotable mass in the left flank. So left flank means, ballotable mass means that kidney mass is there. There is painless hematuria. And no WBCs are seen in the urine. No WBCs are there. Okay. So pyelonephritis is out because no WBCs are there. Hydronephrosis is out. Polycystic kidney disease is out. Renal cell cancer, elderly patient. Polycystic kidney disease can come with a lump, but it will come much early in life, not 65. 65, painless hematuria, more likely to be renal cell cancer. 20-year-old male comes with sudden onset pain in the right inguinoscrotal region. So you have a young male, pain in the right inguinoscrotal region. On examination, the testis is higher up. Testis is higher up in position and tender on palpation. So testis riding high and acute pain. This is suggestive of testicular torsion. Now, epididymoorchitis. Epididymoorchitis is inflammation and infection of the epididymis and the cord. That can also come with same features. But how do we differentiate the two? This has been asked many times. So, testicular torsion seen in young adults, acute scrotal pain, differential diagnosis is epididymoorchitis. There are three signs: Prenn sign, Angel sign and Deming sign. Prenn sign is if you lift the testis, pain will increase in torsion, like it has been written in the question, that increased pain on palpation. Angel sign is transversely placed testis. This is also seen in torsion. And Deming sign was also mentioned in the question, that the testis is riding higher up. It goes higher up. So these are features of testicular torsion. This is an emergency. Patient requires surgery. A patient working in the dye industry presents with bladder cancer. What is the common type of cancer seen? So dye industry, bladder cancer, this is going to be a classical transitional cell carcinoma. So chemical exposure, aniline dye exposure, this is going to give rise to transitional cell cancer. Squamous cell cancer is seen in Africa, and this is seen in schistosomiasis as well. Transitional cell cancer is the most common cancer, is the most common bladder cancer. Okay. A 10 months baby is brought to the hospital by his mother. His right testis is in the inguinal canal, inguinal region. Left testis is in the perineum. So you know, if a testis normally should be there in the scrotum, but if the testis is in the inguinal region, that is the most common site for undescended testis. So undescended testis, inguinal region. Perineum will be ectopic testis, right? So left testis is ectopic, right testis is undescended. Very good question. This can be asked in future. You need to understand this concept that testis normally comes down into the scrotum. The most common site for undescended testis is inguinal canal. The most common site for ectopic testis is the superficial inguinal pouch. So both are different, don't get confused. Ectopic is when it deviates from the path, like it has gone to the perineum. A newborn child is born with a scaphoid abdomen and respiratory distress. X-ray image is shown below. What is the diagnosis? You can see in this X-ray that bowel is in the thorax. All the bowel is in the thorax, right? This can be seen in congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Congenital diaphragmatic hernia, there is a defect in the diaphragm and all the bowel comes into the thorax. Again, what has been asked, most common is Bochdelic. Most common is Bochdelic or left posterolateral. That is the most common diaphragmatic hernia. Right anteromedial is Morgagni. Patient is going to come with a scaphoid abdomen. There is going to be respiratory distress in these patients. Pulmonary hypoplasia, because all the bowel is in the thorax, lung cannot develop, right? Lung cannot develop, and pulmonary hypoplasia is the leading cause of death in these children. So these all are very important points asked very frequently. A lady presents with a growth over the side of the nose. What is the likely diagnosis? This is a typical basal cell carcinoma. BCC is basal cell carcinoma. This is also known as rodent ulcer. Basal cell carcinoma, also known as rodent ulcer. The most common site is the face, above the line joining the angle of the mouth to the ear lobule. That is the most common site, face above this line. This is locally invasive. It invades locally but rarely shows metastasis. right? It will go burrow locally, but it will not show metastasis to the lymph nodes or distant metastasis. And you have to excise it widely. An old man, elderly male with vertebral and bony metastasis. So vertebral and bony metastasis in males, most common cause is going to be prostate cancer. If this question was females, then the answer would have been breast cancer. In males, prostate; in females, breast cancer. These are the two cancers which are frequently going to go to the bones and to the vertebral column. Prostate cancer, osteoblastic metastases are more common than bone destroying or lytic metastases. Breast cancer, osteolytic metastases are more common than blastic metastases. So please remember this. A male with Buerger's disease. Buerger's disease, you know, is thromboangiitis obliterans, and Buerger's disease, lower limbs, it will lead to gangrene. This patient undergoes lumbar sympathectomy and both L1 ganglion are removed. What side effect will he suffer from? So lumbar sympathectomy is done to relieve the pain. It is done for pain relief, and we leave L1 at least on one side. L1 ganglion is at least left on one side because L1 is related to ejaculation, and if you remove both the L1 ganglions, patient will have difficulty in ejaculation. A lady with atrial fibrillation presents with sudden arterial occlusion of the lower limb. Which one of the following signs has poor prognosis? You know, atrial fibrillation, there can be emboli, and emboli can lead to acute occlusion, and you can get 6 P's. You can get 6 P's: pain, pallor, pulselessness, paresis. These are 4. You have poikilothermia. Poikilothermia is the limb becoming cold. And you have paresis. Paresis is weakness. Out of these 6, the most severe is paralysis. If paralysis occurs, that is the most severe out of these 6 P's. You need to carry out an embolectomy immediately in these patients. The final question is that a patient undergoes prolonged surgery and is bedridden for a long period. Surgeon examines her lower limb and is found to have, and the patient is found to have Homan sign positive. What is the diagnosis? You know, Homan's and Moses signs are signs of DVT, deep venous thrombosis. Again, a very important topic, deep venous thrombosis. Most common symptom is pain. Most common sign is lymphedema. It is usually unilateral. The two signs are Homan's sign, that is dorsiflexion of the foot will give rise to pain, and Moses sign. Both have been asked. Moses is when you squeeze the calf, there will be pain. Both the signs have been asked in the exam, but remember, we never do these signs, right? Don't try to do these signs on a patient because you can dislodge the clot and cause an embolism. Okay? The investigation of choice has been asked. It is a duplex or a color Doppler. That is what you should know. So these were the June 2021 FMG recall questions. I hope you've understood these questions. Please do revise them before your next exam, because a lot of repeats are being asked in the FMG exam. Also on my YouTube channel, you can see 2 or 3 image-based sessions for FMGs. Do watch those images. There were 20 images which were asked, and if your images are strong, you can easily answer these 20 questions in the exam. If you have any further questions, please do write them in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. Do subscribe to the channel and like this video. I will keep on posting more content for FMG and PG students, so you can look at those questions for your future exams as well. I can also be contacted on Instagram where my ID is left-handed surgeon, and I have my Facebook page by the name of Rohan Khandelwal. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.